I always knew I didn't belong at that table, the long mahogany one in the Langston Estates dining room, the one that seated 12, but judged with 20 eyes. The first time I sat there, I thought I was being accepted. By the third Thanksgiving, I realized I was just tolerated like a coat rack in the wrong foyer. That night, the night everything cracked wide open, Marissa didn't look at me like a husband. She looked at me like a broken appliance she forgot to throw out. Her father, Henry Langston, had poured his second glass of Bordeaux and launched into one of his favorite topics, merit. Only in his version of the word, it meant private equity internships and last names that looked good on a marble plaque. I don't know what set him off that evening. Maybe it was the way I used the wrong salad fork. Or maybe he'd just had a long day pretending his hedge fund wasn't bleeding. Either way, he leaned back, swirled his glass, and said loud enough for even the servers to hear, "We all make mistakes." Marissa's was marrying someone who thought integrity paid the bills. I smiled more out of instinct than amusement, but my jaw tightened. Marissa didn't defend me. She didn't even look up, just kept slicing her salmon like nothing had happened. Her mother adjusted her pearl necklace and muttered something about ambition needing the right environment. Then her brother Grant, who hadn't worked a full day in his life, but drove a Porsche paid for by a trust fund, smirked and said, "Jack's a good guy, though. He's like character development for the rest of us." The laughter around the table felt like tiny paper cuts, not deep, but plenty. I sat there, my mouth dry, knowing I could fire back. I could tell them about the year I spent cleaning up the mess left by their firm's quiet accounting scandal, the part where I risked my career to report it anonymously. But no one in that room wanted to hear truth. They were building empires out of appearance, and truth has an ugly voice when it doesn't wear designer shoes. Later that evening, in the marble-tiled foyer, Marissa handed me an envelope. No expression, no hesitation. "I've filed," she said. This isn't working. You're kind, Jack, but you're too much heart and not enough horsepower." I stood there, still in the tux she'd insisted I wear, rented, not tailored, and looked at her. Her hair was perfect, her voice cool. I remembered our first apartment, one bedroom, no dishwasher, and her dancing to Sam Cooke in the kitchen with bare feet and chipped nail polish. That version of her didn't exist anymore. Maybe I'd loved a phase. Maybe she had too. "I see," I said, even though I didn't. "Not fully. Not yet." "You're a good man," she added, as if it were a consolation prize. "But I need more. I want more. I was never supposed to stay small." The word stayed with me long after she left. Small. Like I was a placeholder. Like I hadn't worked 2 jobs to help her through grad school. Like I hadn't supported her when she changed careers twice. Like love, patience, and loyalty were quaint little things that didn't scale well in her world of ambition and optics. A week later, her family's attorney offered me a generous settlement in exchange for a signed NDA and a clean walkaway. No mess, no noise, no trouble for her image. I told him to keep his check. Told him I had nothing to hide and nothing to fear. Told him I wasn't small, just quiet, and I meant it. I packed my things in a rented U-Haul and drove north. No destination in mind. Just a promise to myself I wouldn't let this break me. I'd find peace. Not in proving them wrong, but in building something they couldn't touch. They had the table. I'd build my own. From scratch. From heart. From wood that didn't splinter when pressure came. And one day, when they least expected it, they'd see it too. They say silence is loud when you've lost everything, but that's not true. Real silence, the kind you feel in your ribs, comes after the noise dies down. After the arguing, the phone calls, the pitying glances. After the people who once asked, "How are you holding up?" stop asking at all. That's the silence I met when I crossed into Vermont, with everything I owned, rattling in the back of a 10-year-old truck, and a tool belt I hadn't touched in years. I rented a small cabin near a lake, not the picturesque kind you see on postcards, but the kind where the trees grow wild and the floor creaks when you walk too hard. I found it on a bulletin board outside a hardware store. No lease. Just a handwritten note, cash only. Quiet preferred. That was me, now quiet preferred. The first few weeks were slow. I chopped wood, replaced cracked window panes, learned to cook without a microwave. I'd wake up to the sound of loons echoing off the water, and for the first time in years, I didn't wake up to emails or expectations. Just breath, just space. I started working odd jobs around town, fixing broken chairs, patching roofs, restoring antique dresses people assumed were unsalvageable. At first, they didn't know what to make of me. A man in his 30s, no family, no backstory, asking for half the going rate just to keep his hands busy. But word spreads fast in small towns, especially when your work doesn't cut corners. By winter, I had clients. By spring, I had a backlog. There was one project that changed everything. A local teacher named Emily asked if I could help repair her grandfather's barn. It had collapsed in a storm, and insurance wouldn't cover the full rebuild. I told her I'd take a look. Her son Liam was maybe 10. Quiet kid, skittish at first, but always watching. I started letting him hand me tools, hold the flashlight paint corners. He started calling it our project. One evening, as we wrapped up, staining the doors, Emily brought out lemonade and said, half joking, "You know you're like this town's best-kept secret." I didn't know what to say to that. I'd spent so long feeling disposable that the idea of being kept even as a secret felt foreign. But Liam looked up from the brush and said, "You're the only adult who doesn't yell when things go wrong." That hit me harder than I expected. Sometimes the smallest things rebuild you. A child's trust, the smell of cut pine, the way wood bends under pressure but doesn't break if you treat it right. I never told anyone about Marissa, not in detail. They knew I'd come from somewhere downstate. They assumed I'd left something behind, but no one asked, and I didn't offer. It was like I'd stepped out of one life and into another one, where I was seen not for my resume or the family I married into, but for what I could make with my hands. One night, alone in the workshop, I opened a journal I'd started keeping. I wrote day 137. I didn't think healing would look like sawdust and rusted hinges, but here we are. I'm not rich, but I feel full, and for the first time in a long time, I don't miss her. I miss who I thought she was. That's different. I closed the book and turned off the lights. The shop smelled like cedar and linseed oil. Peace has a sound. It's not silence. It's wood settling. It's your own breath when no one's left to impress. It's the absence of shame. But what I didn't know then was that my past hadn't fully let go of me. It was watching, waiting. And one day, it would knock on my door again, not as a ghost, but dressed in a tux, holding a champagne flute, standing next to the woman who once said I was too much heart and not enough horsepower. And when it did, I wouldn't be the same man they remembered. It arrived on a Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday where nothing remarkable should happen. Grey sky, half a cup of reheated coffee, a to-do list, taped to the fridge, with more hope than intention. I almost threw it out, mistaking it for a charity appeal or wedding photography promo. But then I saw the handwriting, sharp, deliberate cursive, that looked like it had never written a grocery list in its life. The envelope was cream thick and smelled faintly of bergamot and expensive regret. Inside, a gold-trimmed card, raised lettering, monogrammed initials M and C. Marissa Langston and Carter Blaine request the honor of your presence. I stared at it for a long moment, like it might catch fire if I held it wrong. The paper felt heavier than it should have, like it knew the weight of history it carried. 5 years of silence. 5 years since she handed me that envelope in her family's foyer like I was a subscription she was cancelling. And now, here she was inviting me back into that world. Not for closure. Not for forgiveness. For show. There was no way this wasn't deliberate. Marissa didn't do coincidence. Her family didn't leave loose ends. This invitation, it wasn't a mistake. It was a performance. Maybe she wanted to show me how much better her life had turned out. Maybe she assumed I'd still be bitter and broken, pining over what I'd lost. Maybe she expected me to show up wearing the same invisible shame she'd handed me the day I left. I turned the card over. No return address. But there was a handwritten note scrawled at the bottom corner. Hope you still have a suit that fits. M. That one line said everything. This wasn't a gesture of grace. It was bait. I placed the card down and walked outside, letting the cold air bite at my face. I watched the trees sway under the weight of early spring rain. And I thought about all the things I hadn't said the night she left, all the things I'd swallowed in the name of keeping peace. I wasn't angry, but I was ready. That night I pulled out my old suit, the one from our engagement photos. It still fit, but barely. The shoulders felt tighter, not because I'd gained weight, but because I'd grown into myself. I booked a room in Newport, Rhode Island, not at the luxury resort where the wedding was being held, but at a modest bed and breakfast just down the hill. Owned by an older couple named June and Rob, who didn't care about last names, just whether you wanted decaf or regular. When I told June the reason for my visit, she raised an eyebrow and asked, "You going for revenge or redemption?" I shrugged. Neither. I'm going to return something. She smiled. What's that? I looked out the window. Her narrative. The Langstons had spared no expense. The venue was a castle-style estate, perched above the Newport cliffs, all white stone gold trim and generational arrogance. It was the kind of place where even the doorknobs looked like they judged you. I arrived just before the ceremony, dressed in my old suit-polished boots and a new tie I'd picked up at a consignment shop. Nothing flashy, just enough to blend in without pretending. The valet barely glanced at me. Inside, the air was thick with perfume candle wax and legacy. Marissa's world had always smelled expensive. Not warm, just polished. The music swelled in the background, strings, soft chatter laughter like clinking glass. I stayed near the back, where I belonged, or so I thought. It didn't take long for someone to notice me. She appeared like she always did, flawlessly. Marissa in a white sheath gown that shimmered like an apology wrapped in silk. Her hair coiled in a perfect knot, her smile poised like a knife. She approached with two of her bridesmaids in tow, both of them clearly prepped, like they'd been briefed on how to handle me. One of them whispered something that made the other laugh behind her champagne glass. "Well," Marissa said, looking me up and down. "You cleaned up." As expected. I smiled. Suit still fits. Barely. She gave me that signature tilt of the head, half pity, half performance. "I almost didn't think you'd come. Thought maybe Vermont had swallowed you whole." "It almost did," I said. But I had something to return. She raised an eyebrow. What exactly? Perspective. The air around us shifted slightly. Her smile faltered for a split second before she caught herself. Before she could reply, a voice cut through the hum of conversation. Jack I turned. Carter Blaine. Tall. Slick. Designer everything. Holding a tumbler of bourbon in one hand and a legacy watch on the other. He froze mid-step when he saw me. The blood drained from his face faster than the glass slipped from his grip and hit the stone floor with a sharp crack. He didn't move, just stared. "Jack Harlan," he said, voice low and hoarse. People began to turn. Conversations trailed off. The string quartet missed a cue. "You two know each other?" Marissa asked, looking from him to me, her voice beginning to waver. Carter didn't answer. I did. "We go back," I said calmly, "before your rebrand, before the house in Montauk." Back when he was pushing numbers, he shouldn't have been pushing and asking people like me to stay quiet about it. A sharp intake of breath. One of the groomsmen looked visibly ill. Marissa blinked. What is this? What are you talking about?" Carter was pale now. "It's not what you think." I took a step closer, not for drama, but for clarity. "Your fiancé was part of a scheme securities fraud insider trading. Years ago. I was working at the same firm. I tried to raise concerns internally. They silenced me. So I went to the feds." Marissa's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Carter stepped forward, desperate now. "I didn't know you were that, Jack. I changed everything. I made a deal. I left it behind." "You didn't change?" I said. "You just buried it. Like you buried the truth." One of Marissa's bridesmaids gasped. Another began quietly backing away. "But how? Why are you even here?" she asked, voice cracking. "Because you invited me," I said. "Because I think somewhere deep down you wanted this moment, not consciously. But something in you, the part that still knows the difference between glitter and gold, wanted to see what real looks like again." Her lips trembled. "You lied to me," she whispered, turning to Carter. "You said you had no past. You said your record was spotless." "I had to," Carter said. "If I told you the truth, you wouldn't have stayed. You wouldn't have loved me." "I didn't love you," she said softly. "I loved what you gave me." The truth hung heavy, and this time she didn't try to hide from it. "You said Jack was a nobody," one of her friends muttered. "Said he lived in a shack and still talked about ethics like it was a hobby." I looked around. Faces were shifting. People were whispering. Some were recording. The story was already escaping the walls. I turned back to Marissa. "You said I was too small," I said. "But I'd rather live small and honest than stand tall on a foundation that collapses with a Google search." Silence. And then from the back, a single awkward clap. It stopped just as quickly, but it was enough. The room's gravity had shifted. Carter backed away. Marissa didn't follow. "I didn't come here to humiliate you," I said. "But you invited me into your illusion, so I brought the truth with me." She took a shaky breath. "So what now?" "That's not for me to decide," I said. "But the wedding's over, that much is clear." And with that, I turned and walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The echo of everything I used to be, the silence, the shame, the doubt, didn't follow me this time. I left it behind, right there on that marble floor, next to the broken glass, and the man who thought his past had been buried. There were no vows, no rings, no first dance. Just silence and judgment echoing down gold-plated hallways as guests shuffled out, heads turned whispers, trailing behind them like silk ribbons. The Langstons didn't speak to me as I passed by. Henry, her father, stood near the bar, jaw clenched, holding a glass he hadn't touched. For a moment, we locked eyes. He looked away first. Marissa didn't chase after me. She didn't say my name. She just stood there, in that perfect white dress, no longer a bride, not yet someone else staring at Carter, like she didn't know whether to scream or collapse. Maybe both. Carter tried. He really did. As I walked out the front doors, I could still hear his voice breaking behind me. "Marissa, listen to me. It's all in the past. We can explain this. We can recover." But there are some things you can't explain with monologues or flowers. Not when they've already detonated in front of 70 people, half of whom carry PR firm retainers. I made it to the curb when someone caught up with me, an older woman in a dark teal shawl, silver grey hair pinned neatly. Marissa's aunt. Lydia, I think her name was. She'd always seemed like the only one in that family who saw people instead of portfolios. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "About all of that." I shrugged. "You don't owe me that." "No," she said, "but she does. And if she never says it, I want someone to say it anyway." We stood there for a moment, two people on opposite sides of a family collapse, watching the empire buckle under the weight of its own arrogance. "I hope she learns from this," Lydia added. "Though I'm not sure she will." I didn't answer. Some people don't change until everything comfortable is stripped away. Some never do. "I hope you found peace," she said. "I built it," I replied. She smiled, small real, and nodded before turning back toward the crumbling celebration. As I waited for the shuttle back to my inn, I took a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Not relief, not triumph, release. The kind that only comes when you finally walk out of a story that tried to erase you. 3 days later, I returned to Vermont. The first thing I did was unlock my workshop and run my fingers over the grain of a half-finished table. Maple strong and steady, just like I felt. I spent that night sketching a new design, something simple, elegant, for no client, just for me. Later, I walked down to the lake. The stars were out. The world didn't know what had happened in Newport. Didn't care. And that's the beauty of real peace. It doesn't need to be broadcast. It just needs to be lived. I didn't hate Marissa. Not anymore. I didn't wish her pain. But I hoped truly that one day she'd look back at the girl who mocked real love in favor of curated love and finally ask herself why. And maybe that would be the beginning of something honest for her. But that was her journey now, not mine. Mine was built plank by plank, with hands that no longer shook, and a heart that finally beat without apology. Within weeks, Carter Blaine's face was splashed across digital news tickers and finance blogs. Whistleblower wedding bombshell made it to the second page of a business site known for loving scandals more than earnings reports. The headlines didn't name me, and that was fine. I wasn't the story. His deception was. Regulators reopened old files. One by one, Carter's board appointments were reviewed, then revoked. The companies that once toasted his turnaround success story quietly deleted their LinkedIn mentions of him. Investors pulled out. Projects fell apart. He tried to shift blame, claimed the allegations were overblown. But when the SEC came knocking and the whispers turned into subpoenas, even the loyalists stepped back. Eventually, he disappeared again, only this time he didn't resurface on the cover of a lifestyle magazine. Just a rumor, a cautionary tale. As for Marissa, her unraveling was slower, less cinematic, but somehow sadder. The social circles she once dazzled began to forget her name. Not out of cruelty, but because embarrassment is a virus no one wants to catch. People unfollowed, uninvited, unbothered. She tried starting a podcast, The Real Me, some rebranding of her fall from grace. 2 episodes in it vanished. Word was she'd moved in with her sister out in a quieter part of Connecticut, trying to piece together a job in non-profit marketing. From gala tables to modest desks. I never laughed at that, because I knew how it felt to rebuild. The difference was I didn't mock the quiet life before I needed it. Back in Vermont, my work never made headlines, but it made homes. I taught 3 apprentices now, young guys who reminded me of versions of myself. One, David, was fresh out of a halfway house and just learning how to hold a chisel. He asked me once, mid-project, "Jack, Why didn't you go after them? Like for real? Sue 'em, blast 'em, go viral. I looked up from the piece I was sanding an oak bookshelf built for a retired librarian. Because peace weighs more than pride, I said. And it lasts longer. He didn't get it. Not then. But one day he will. There's something about working with your hands that rewires the soul. It teaches you that straight lines aren't natural, that strength lies in patience, that just because something's cracked doesn't mean it's broken. You learn to listen, not just to wood, but to silence, the kind that doesn't echo with regret. One evening, as the sun filtered through the rafters of the shop, I pulled out a drawer where I kept old things, not trophies, just markers. A photo of my first commission. The note from Liam that said, "Thank you for fixing something everyone else gave up on." And in the back, folded neatly, was that wedding invitation. I almost threw it away, but instead I kept it, not as a reminder of the pain, but as proof of the detour that led me home. It came on a late autumn morning, folded between utility bills and a local newsletter. Same cream-coloured envelope, same sharp handwriting. But this one had no glitter, no gold foil trim, just my name. Jack Harlan, no title, no flourish. I knew it was from her before I even opened it. I sat on the porch with my coffee growing cold beside me and unfolded the letter slowly, like it might change tone if I read it too quickly. Jack, I've rewritten this too many times. I don't know how to say it right, so I'll just say it plain. You were right. About everything. I didn't see your value until it was gone. Not because it wasn't there, but because I didn't know how to recognize it. I confused shine with strength, power with peace. I spent years chasing noise. I hope you found the quiet you always deserved. I hope it held you like I never could. I don't expect a reply. I just wanted you to know I finally see it now. Marissa. I folded it back up, ran my thumb along the crease, and placed it in the drawer beside the others, not in bitterness, but in balance. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't regret. It was simply acknowledgement, and that was enough. I went back to work that afternoon, sanding a reclaimed walnut slab for a family who had just bought their first home. They didn't know my story, didn't care about Newport or inheritance or public scandals. They just wanted something built with care, and that's what I gave them. Because some people chase legacy through money noise and mirrors. But me, I build with oak and iron, and I sleep peacefully, every single night. Sometimes the most powerful form of justice isn't loud or public. It's simply living a life of quiet dignity after someone tried to make you feel small. This story reminds us that strength doesn't always wear armor or speak with fire. Sometimes it looks like walking away without retaliation, building something honest with your own hands, and letting the truth reveal itself in its own time. Many of us have faced moments where we were underestimated, dismissed, or made to feel like our value depended on how well we fit into someone else's version of success. But real worth isn't defined by image or approval. It's rooted in integrity, peace, and the ability to sleep at night without carrying a mask. When we stop chasing validation from people who never truly saw us, we begin the real work of healing. And often life finds a way to bring the truth to light, no revenge needed. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about what happens when you trust yourself enough to start over and stay honest, even when it hurts. If this story resonated with you, we invite you to share your thoughts or similar experiences in the comments. Was there a time you had to walk away from something or someone to protect your peace? Tap, like if you believe in the quiet power of truth, and subscribe to the channel for more real, emotional, and deeply human stories like this one. Until next time, may your peace be greater than your pride, and your worth never again be up for debate.